tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
I said a few weeks ago that, yes, it's all well and good when Muslims and evangelicals, and I think just in general, most parents can all be on the same side of an issue. I don't know what these folks believe about any number of other things. So I don't believe that this alliance will necessarily extend to other political issues, but I do believe that it has revealed in the liberal narrative on diversity issues a bit of a fault line, which is that they only love diversity when they don't have to reckon with ideological diversity. Once we have people thinking differently, well, that is not the type of diversity that we hold up as being Canadians' strength or Canada's strength. I want to talk about this and some other issues on the parental choice front with Alissa Golob, who is the co-founder of RightNow and joins me on the line. Alyssa, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Glad you weren't vaporized.
Well, we'll see how things go by the end of the show here. Now, just for context here, RightNow is a very effective pro-life political group, and I know often the pro-life cause or social conservatism is viewed as being, I think in some cases, a very Catholic thing, certainly a Christian thing, but that's not really true in a meaningful way. If you look at the landscape of Canadians, a lot of the values that you talk about are shared by virtually every religious group on the face of the earth except for the United Church.
Yeah, and I mean, we just on our podcast this week interviewed a transgendered Canadian commentator named Julia Malott, who's also speaking out about this. So even people within the LGBT community are talking about not targeting children with gender ideology. So it's not just a religious issue. It's not just a Muslim issue or a Christian issue. It affects Canadians of all different walks of life across party lines. And polls show this, as well as people who are speaking out about it.
Yeah, and I think in this particular case, we have a lot of people that have been pushed to something that was more gradual at first. I mean, that famous audio clip from an Edmonton school that came out where the teacher is chastising the Muslim students for not going along with the Pride stuff because everyone else had to go along with their Ramadan stuff, is basically her argument. And the catchphrase of that, "It's not a joke, Mansour," is one that rings true. And you see in New Brunswick here how a leader who I would say has not been particularly useful on a lot of other issues, certainly not through COVID, Blaine Higgs, ended up becoming a very strong leader on this. And even in the face of massive criticism, including from within his own party, has held the line on parental rights.
Yeah, I think Canadian politicians, specifically in the Conservative Party, whether it's provincial or federal, have to look at what Blaine Higgs is doing and emulate that if they want to actually connect and invigorate their voting base. Because not only is he taking a stand on an issue that a lot of Canadians care about, specifically, in the Conservative Party, but like I said, across all party lines, but he's also not backing down. He is getting absolutely eviscerated in the mainstream media and by the opposition, but he's not backing down whatsoever. And when polls come out about this issue in New Brunswick about parental consent, if your child wants to socially transition in schools, the majority of Canadians are on side with Higgs. The overwhelming majority of Canadians, I think it was only 18% that are actually on the opposition. And then the majority of people who live in Atlantic Canada are also on side with Blaine Higgs. So that's why when the opposition says, oh, we should have a leadership review or threaten an election, they actually don't want that because they know they're going to lose.
Yeah, and I mean, I spoke about the New Brunswick stuff a few weeks back, and what's shocking if you look at it is that it actually is a very modest bill. I mean, it's not even, I would say it could have gone a lot further and still be on side with where a lot of Canadians are, but it doesn't do what the critics accuse it of doing. It doesn't out anyone to their parents. In fact, it is not empowering schools to reach out to parents without consent in general. It's just saying that if a child wants to go through this transition, a child under the age of 16, I think it is, they need a parent to consent to that. So it's not a road of communication towards parents here. And I think that, what's shocking to me about this is that the core argument for people that support the criticism against Blaine Higgs, for people that support the denunciation of Muslim families and other families, is really that schools should be keeping secrets from parents. I mean, that's effectively the argument here. And I've never heard anyone come out and refute that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very good argument when when your whole talking point is that parents are the enemy. And
Mhm.
when we've tried to separate parents from their children in the past, it hasn't worked out too well. I think we should learn those lessons throughout Canadian history. So why are we trying to do it with this issue? It's just nonsensical. It hasn't worked out. And parents, Canadians are parents. A lot of Canadians are parents. They are not the enemy. Parents know what's best for their children, not teachers. And what they're trying to do is separate those children from their parents so that if parents do try to intervene, well, then the teachers or the schools or most likely the government is their savior. And that's ultimately what they want to be seen as. So I think this is, as long as you said, it doesn't go far enough. But another thing I want to mention too is that in Ontario, I don't think a lot of people know this, this is already a policy that parents do not have to be notified when their children socially transition in schools. This is something that's coming up in New Brunswick because Blaine Higgs is reversing a policy that was kind of quietly passed. But this is already a policy in a lot of different provinces, including Ontario.
Yeah, and you've through Right Now launched a petition to basically stand with Blaine Higgs, but more about the mechanisms being used here is that he's actually facing a calls for a leadership review. So I can't stress enough that there are parents that again, it's hard to find an issue in politics that is as unifying as this, but somehow it hasn't unified the PC party in New Brunswick.
Yeah, and I mean, petitions are good to show solidarity, but the, specific reason why we use our petition is so that we can build our supporter base so that when a leadership review does come, we will actively sell memberships and support that politician that is speaking out. So in this case, Blaine Higgs. So not only will we show, solidarity through a petition, but we'll also use that to actually effectively give him the votes that he needs to win.
So just in the bigger context here, I mean, we have this, I'll say a coalition. I mean, it's a very thin coalition between, some transgender folks, like you mentioned, between Muslim Canadians, Christian Canadians. I think in general, just a lot of parents that are not particularly religious or political. Do you think this is kind of a one-time deal that, when it comes to what kids are being taught in schools, everyone can get together, but the second you deviate from that issue, everyone kind of goes back into their corners again?
No, I do think that it will unify a lot of people and it will start with the gender ideology issue, but I think people are a lot more unified on social issues in general. And culture wars are facing different parts of the world and they're coming to Canada. They already are here. And a lot of conservative politicians are, reticent to talk about these issues, but they are here and people care about them. And so, I think that in order to win, to motivate the base, to win future elections, there will have to be a solid opposition taking a stand on these issues, taking a stand with parents, taking a stand with people of all different faith backgrounds, and really protecting family values in Canada because our children are being targeted. I mean, just in Manitoba, recently in a city in Manitoba, they were putting in different really sexually explicit books in the library, and they actually had to change one of their school board meetings from the school board to a gymnasium because so many people were pouring in because this was an issue that they cared about. You can see these rallies happening in Ottawa and London, in different in Calgary, where people of all different faith or non-faith communities are coming together, and they're growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more, it's similar to the COVID issue, I feel like, because the more that Trudeau tries to make an enemy of Canadians, like he did with the COVID issue, like you're a fringe minority when that's clearly not the case, the more people are going to rise up. So in a sense, the more, these teachers in Edmonton say, your ideology you don't belong in Canada to these Muslim students, or Trudeau says, oh, this is a far-right Americanization of the issue, the more people are going to stand up, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have, like, let's say a Catholic and a Calvinist and a Wesleyan Armenian in a room, they can all find no shortage of things to yell at each other about and disagree about. But when you talk about sort of core values issues and core
Mhm.
moral issues, they're all going to be in agreement on 99.9% of things. Same as if you extend the room and throw a Sikh in there and a Hindu guy and a Muslim and a Jew. And again, they can disagree with lots on Indian politics, on Middle Eastern politics, but on these core values and moral issues, they'll agree on things. And that divide and conquer thing that we see from the media and from the government is such an important tool to take note of here, because anytime abortion, for example, comes up in an election, the media and Justin Trudeau's team will all make it seem like there is a much broader consensus around their side on this than actually exists in Canadian society. Even if people in Canada will disagree on, well, rape and incest or third trimester second. I mean, the majority of Canadians is on a different side than the Liberal government is on this.
Yeah, and to use Trudeau's words, it's often the fringe minority that have the views of Trudeau. Like less than 10% of Canadians, 18% of Canadians want, don't want children to be able to secretly socially transition. What I find interesting about this whole situation is that the LGBT community originally started to say, we want equality. We just want to be treated like everyone else and be left alone. And it's now become, in Toronto, they want to force kids to go to drag queen story hour in their schools without being able to opt out. So now it's become, you have to do this and there's no way out. And ultimately what the other side is saying is, we just want to raise our kids. We just want them to go to the school and be left alone. We don't want different views being pushed down our throat. Like, for example, what happened in Regina with Planned Parenthood. They get into the schools, they do their presentation on God knows what. And then a 14-year-old leaves with a stack of cards, which has the ABC alphabet of sexuality. And some of the terms are about urinating and defecating on your partner and being sexually attracted to a television this isn't even a joke. This is teaching kids about these really weird kinks that Planned Parenthood say are legitimate. So ultimately, as parents, as Canadians, we just want to send our kids to school. We want to be able to have the freedom to teach them whatever we want to teach them when it comes to our faith, and we don't want things being shoved down our throat. And I think they're pushing the envelope way too far by targeting kids and refraining from being able to opt out, and that's why you're seeing this backlash right now.
Very well said. RightNow co-founder Alyssa Golob. Always good to talk to you, Alyssa. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.